Hi friends, so glad you're back with us for our See the Light, Yes You Can Draw club meetings. This is club meeting number 14. I'm Pat Nepley, your master artist. I'll be with you through all of these meetings. Now the last time we were together, we talked about color blending with colored pencils. And we're going to be continuing that today, so let me tell you what you're going to need for today's club meeting. You'll need a standard pencil, your set of colored pencils. If you have extra colors, that's great, totally up to you. You'll need a really good eraser. Always have your pencil sharpener handy. Color pencils work best when they're sharp. And you'll need a piece of paper, but you can choose the color. I'm going to be working on a slightly colored paper so you can see it a little better, but white paper is fine. So when we were together last time, we used some techniques that you learned for color blending with colored pencils. And that was scrumbling, little tiny circles, and hatching and cross-hatching, where you do parallel lines in an X shape. And that's how we get the colors that we want, by light layering. Do you remember that? Color pencils don't have a lot of pigment. They turn up pretty light. They're a pencil. So in order to get the color you want, you need to do layer after layer. And it requires some patience. We learned about that too. So for today, we're going to do an actual study in colored pencil. Now, what's the difference between a drawing and a study? Well, a finished drawing usually takes a little more planning, and you're a little more careful, and it takes a lot of time. But as you're learning how to use colored pencils, I want you to do a study. So for today, we're going to do a flower study. And for this, you'll need, it can be a fake flower, or it can be a real flower, whatever you have handy. I would prefer, for this first time together, for you to find a flower that has a center button. So a sunflower has a center button, an aster, a daisy. There's lots of different kinds of flowers that have a center button, and that's what I'd like you to find for today's lesson. Now, if you don't have one around, that's okay. You can follow along with me and use the one that I have right here in the studio. Now, artists love to use flowers just like they like to use fruit, and what that's called is a still life. Your subject matter is a still life. Now, what is a still life? It could be any of these things you see here on the table. A pitcher, other types of dishes, fruit, flowers, books. A still life simply means something that's not moving or living or outdoors. Those are different types of subject matter. A still life is very popular with artists for several reasons. One, it can stay put. So if you have to do a painting that requires a lot of time, you set up your still life and you leave it there for a while. This is a still life right here with the jar and the mug and the fruit that I did in pastel a long time ago. Now, still life is also great to use as subject matter because you can vary the shapes and the positions so easily. If you don't like where something is, if it's in front, you move it to the back, or you turn it. So if I didn't like where this pear is, I can move it. I can change where my pot is and put the pear in front. Gives you a lot of options for your composition, how you're going to plan your painting. So today we're going to be doing a still life study using a flower. Now, instead of worrying about flowers in a vase or something like that, we're just going to focus on the actual flower since we're working with color blending. So here's an example of a flower. I did mine rather large so you can see it with a center button. So on your piece of paper, we're going to work with a much smaller study. Now, I might do it larger so you can see it, but you're just going to work about the size of your fist. That's a good guide. So put your fist down on the paper. See that size? I don't want your flower to be any larger than that. It'll just take too much time and will be harder for you to see our techniques of the study. I think of some artists who use still lifes and use flowers a lot. One of them is Vincent van Gogh. He was a Dutch painter who actually did most of his work in France. But one of his most favorite subjects was the sunflower, which is what I have here. Here's one of Van Gogh's paintings called Sunflowers. In fact, he had lots of paintings all called sunflowers. They were so prevalent where he used to paint in the south of France that they were a favorite subject matter for his still life. Notice all the beautiful golds and yellows and browns that he put in this painting. Another artist who loved to use flowers as a subject matter was the American artist Georgia O'Keeffe. She loved to use flowers, and she didn't do little studies. She made very large paintings of very close-up views of flowers. Here's one of Georgia's called Red Poppy. Now you might think it's simply a red flower, but if you look closely, you'll see shades of blue and purple and orange and gray and even green in the petals of the red poppy. Okay, now it's time for us to get started on our flower study. So because we're starting with the button-centered flower, a good gauge for us to start is simply to draw the button center, the circle. And that will be where we start. When you're doing a flower study, you always want to pay attention to shape. Do you remember we learned about that in our basics unit? How important it is to spend time looking at shape. So for this study, we're going to very quickly put in the shape of the petals. Now, for the sunflower, the petal shape is not a leaf shape, but it kind of bulges out like a light bulb, has kind of a rounded, almost like a Christmas light bulb. See that shape? That's the shape of this particular petal. Now, because we're doing a study for color, I'm not too concerned about how accurate I'm being with the number of petals, because I just want to get the basic shape down, and so I'm doing them opposite each other, the petals opposite each other, and then filling in so that I have my flower where I can practice color blending. So I have this kind of light bulb shaped petal. Maybe yours is more rounded or very narrow petals. So after I have my basic shape, then I want to put in just a part of the stem. Now here's a great tip for you, boys and girls. A stem is not a wire. It is not a single line. Think of it more like a drinking straw. 2 lines, because it has weight to it. So I'm just going to put in just a slight curve, 2 lines to represent my stem. And that's all we're going to do. We're not going to put in a vase or anything like that. We want to just focus on the flower so we can practice color blending in our study. So for my sunflower, if I look at my sunflower, yes, it's mostly yellow, but it has a lot of orange and even deep red, and of course the center button is brown with some green and some gold. So let's get our colored pencils ready. I know I'm mostly going to use for this study my warm colors, yellow, orange, and red. Now, do you remember our techniques? We're going to start off with our light layer, and I'm going to very quickly color my first layer of yellow. Again, the light layers, you don't need to worry about how filled in or neat you are. Color pencil can erase. And this is a study on color blending, so I can work very quickly. So you do that with me. Now you see that's a far cry from this, right? So after I have in my first layer, I move to my next layer. Now I can see that this is a much golder yellow, not nearly as pale. So I will cover the whole thing with a light layer of orange. Now here's why it's a study, friends. I don't know what it's going to look like until I try it. Supposing it doesn't really come out to be the right color. I'll keep working with several studies, maybe even on the same page, using the same or perhaps different combination of pencils until I get the color that I like. Always pay attention to what you're choosing, so if you go to do your final drawing, you can get the exact shades that you want. Another light layer. Go back with my yellow. Now, how about I try a different technique? I'm going to try the scrumbling technique, little tiny circles, because I can press a little harder to make the color a little richer, but it still is blending. Can you see that? How the yellow is more intense? I'll do the next petal. Now I'm going to focus on these 2 petals here, just so we don't run out of time. And you'll see how the color changes as I build up. Carefully looking at my petals, I see most of the orange concentrated color is toward the center where the petal comes out of the button. Make sure a careful observation is one of your favorite tools. Look at your flower. Carefully look at the color, how it changes. So I'm going to scrumble in some orange closer to the button center, but get lighter as I move out towards the edges, which seem to be more yellow. Go back and do another layer. I'll scrumble that in with little tiny circles. I think there's even some red in there. Time for my red pencil, not too much. And for this technique, I'm going to just use little tiny lines, going right up against the button center and kind of fanning them out as I move out towards the edge of the petal. So the color builds up in slow layers. There's a little bit of goldish orange towards the edges, so I can take my pencils and layer there. Now friends, it takes practice to get just the right look that you want. Perhaps you don't like the way it looks with scrumbling for your particular flower. That's okay. Try hatching. Or just try straight filling in. I'm going to hatch this petal. It will have a totally different look. Now when you go to do your center button, it'll be different for everyone. If you have a daisy, it might be a yellow center button. Mine happens to be kind of a dark brown that has some yellow in it. So when you're working with color pencils, it's always best to use lighter colors first and then go back in with dark. Now why is that? Well, just like when we learned about the importance of keeping your lines light when you draw, it's hard to erase dark lines. And color pencil can be erased, but if you press too hard or use really dark colors, it's a little trickier. So always use your lighter colors first, and then you can add in light layers so it's not too dark until you just build up slowly what you want. So for the center button of my sunflower, I'm going to scrumble in some brown over the yellow, but I see that it's not dark enough. I think I'm going to add some green. I see some greenish tones there. So I'm going to scrumble in some green, little circular motion, and I can see that the edges are darker than the center area. So I'm going to press a little harder, especially at my edges where the petals meet, where the petals meet the button. As I change my pressure so it lightens up as I move and scrumble towards the center, then the center of it becomes lighter. Now when you go to do your stem, you're thinking it's green. All stems are green. But again, we're talking about blending colors, so I don't want you to ever use a straight pencil as your only color. So I can take a green, and I'm going to take a lighter brown, and even a lighter green. So I have 3 different colors. This is why you do a study, to figure out what's going to look the best. I'll use my lightest one first. Again, light layers. Just fill it in. Blend over top with another color. I'm going to take my tannish brown and I'm going to lightly overlay that. I think I want it to be a little greener. So again, I have the choice because I'm doing light layers. I can change it. I'm going to make it a little darker under the petal because it's in shadow where the petal overlaps the stem. And I'll keep it light going down. So when you're doing a study, you're focused on understanding the techniques to get the colors you want rather than a finished drawing. Now, if you keep working on it, if you're satisfied with where it's going, go ahead and make it a finished drawing. But supposing I didn't like the way those color combinations were coming out, or I didn't think they matched my flower, just draw another one down here and continue your study. So for colored pencils, the technique we learned is that you apply light layers. You keep your pencil sharp. You can either hatch or scrumble, and you can erase very easily when you're finished, and that to do a study takes a lot of time and patience till you get just the right combination of colors. Anytime we have flowers or fruit or objects just from around the room, that's called a still life, and you'll hear me talk about that more in some future club meetings. We're going to be using a lot of different tools to draw, and not just still life, but landscapes, which are outdoors, either at the water's edge or land, or portraits, which is when there's people in the picture. I can't wait to try all these things with you because I know you're going to become a better artist. Now, I don't want you to worry about it. I don't want you to worry about whether your flower looks right. Worry is not something that we should be thinking about as we're growing. Just enjoy the process of learning how to draw. In fact, there's a great Bible verse I want to share with you. God talks to us about worrying, and he even uses flowers as his example. This Bible verse is found in the book of Luke. It's Luke 12:27, and it says, "Look at the lilies and how they grow. They don't work or make their clothing, yet Solomon in all his glory was not dressed as beautifully as they are." That was Jesus talking. He was talking to the people that were around him, and he was telling them that birds fly around and they don't worry about where they're going to find their next meal. They just enjoy the day. And that lilies, and all flowers, look absolutely beautiful just the way God made them. They don't worry about their clothing or what they look like. And that's how we should live, not worrying so much, because God will take care of us. And I love how God used flowers as an example for us to learn about not worrying. We should be thinking of the things of God and of heaven, and not whether we eat this or dress like that. Great message from the book of Luke. So friends, next time we're together, we're going to be using a different tool for color blending, one of my favorites, chalk pastels. So I look forward to having you back with me. Can't wait to see you next time.